Okay, so welcome to our last module, module 10, and we're going to talk about the gate icons and depth and complexity.
I don't think you're sharing, girl. Or are you sharing? Yes, you are.
Oh,
Yes, yes, I see.
Can you guys see
Yes.
my slide deck? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so this first of all, let me hear from you if you have any experience at all with maybe teaching gate or being familiar with the gate icons. If I were to have you raise your hand with a fist to 5, your comfort level or experience that you have with teaching GATE, gifted and talented education, and the icons. Where are you? Fist to 5. 5 meaning that you feel really good about it and you use it all the time. All right, I'm seeing a lot of 1s and a 2. Okay, so this, pretty much knowing everything about teaching gifted and talented students is a whole separate, I don't want to call it credential, but a whole separate certificate where there's about 4 or 5 classes that you can take to get certified in this. And so I'm going to share with you an overview because I don't want to go too deep into it. I want to share with you information about it and some ideas that you can implement right away without needing a whole course to explain these to you. But basically, the gate icons, the purpose of the gate icons is for you to be able to pull more out of your students when you're teaching a specific topic, or if you're just discussing a specific topic. And so they have these icons here that will be a symbol to getting them to think at a deeper and more complex level. And the main thing behind this is once you introduce them to your students and you're familiar with them enough that you can introduce them to your students and start using these in the classroom with your students, that it will become as simple as them pointing out when they see something using one of these icons, so that it's like they don't even have to go into a deep discussion with you. It's a matter of, oh my goodness, in this novel right here, in this paragraph of this novel, I see language of the discipline. And so where they would just, in their notations, annotations, start to just draw these symbols, as that would be like a bulleted note, okay, for their for remembering what is going on in that paragraph, for example. Or if you're going through a math lesson, they can do a specific one of these symbols to let you know that they're thinking at a deep level about this particular thing. They put the icon there as just a reminder. So ultimately, the goal is for them to use it and for them to point out when these things are happening with them. But in the beginning, it's going to be a lot of you sharing when they would use these icons and what it means when they use these icons. And so the ones that you see on the left, these are the icons that are associated with deeper thinking. You see the lips for the language of the disciplines, the flower with the little flower petals for showing details, the little Z formation to show patterns. There's one for trends, unanswered questions, rules, ethics, and then the big idea. The icons that push your students to think at a more complex level and in more complex ways is for them to use these 3 icons, which would be over time, past, present, and future. Meaning, so if you're talking about a topic, so how was the American Revolution back when it was actually happening? versus how are some of these things still affecting us today, and how do we think these are things that are going to continue to affect us in the future, that kind of thing. Just really extending the thinking. That would be over time. Then there's the points of view, or this is also known as multiple perspectives, with the little eyeglasses here. And then across disciplines would mean that the students are at that level where they would be able to interconnect a specific idea, not just during social studies time, but they would be able to bridge it and also think about that same idea when learning about science. They might bring it up. Oh, this connects to when we learned about this in social studies. Oh, and also this is the type of math that they would be seeing during this time when we learned about this. And so then they're kind of interconnecting one specific thought that they got from something in many different ways. This is what it would look like from the perspective of a sociologist. This is what it would look like from the perspective of a mathematician. This is what it would look like from the perspective of the author, or whatever, okay? And so the idea behind using these and knowing how to use these is so that they can be used in every single content area, and across all disciplines, to get students to think at a deeper and more complex level. So going in, so for fifth grade, for the new fifth grade teachers, or for Crystal and for Marcos, you will have these icons, just so that you know. We have them in Spanish, so all from kindergarten all the way through fifth grade. And I just last year, right before quarantine, actually, we went ahead and purchased these for fifth grade, because and you may find another set somewhere at Triple Crown, because we had originally purchased all the way for fifth grade these magnetic icons for you to put on your whiteboard. And we also purchased some cards. So they're called Q3. They're question cards. And it's full of questions for each of these prompts, and like question frames for like hundreds and hundreds of question frames that you could ask your students using these specific icons. And so you'll all have them in Spanish. And so when we get back to things and you actually can get in your classroom and get your materials, just know and keep in mind that this is something that you should have, and you may have to be the one to ask Mrs. Seagrave where they are. As a matter of fact, last year I had Daniel drop them off for me for Mrs. Seagrave. Okay, so all right. And so we pretty much already talked about the purpose of them, but I want to show you an example of how a doctor would potentially use some of these icons. So for a doctor needs to understand the language. So what language the doctor is going to be speaking is going to be totally different than the way the patient is going to understand, right? So there's the patient vocabulary, like just ordinary people like you and I, and then there's the vocabulary that the doctor has, right? And so when we think of using the language of the discipline icon, which is the one with the lips, we want our students to think about, so if we're learning about a certain topic, let's say the topic is a doctor or healthcare, we would want to bring to the attention the vocabulary that healthcare workers would have and use versus maybe the ordinary person, okay? For using the icon, the different points of view or the multiple perspectives, the one with the eyeglasses, there are different points, and it's important for students to learn a topic. Let's say we're doing healthcare. So think about COVID-19 right now, right? What is the perspective of the doctor that's trying to save the lives right now for these patients? How do they view things? Versus how would the actual patient going through this view this particular situation that's going on right now? Versus those people that think, you know, don't don't worry about wearing a mask and it doesn't help anything. And there's all of these different views going on in our world today. And everybody has a different perspective. When you would want to bring something like this up and using the multiple perspectives icon, the eyeglasses one is number one, definitely going to help teach students tolerance and awareness for other perspectives going on in the world. And right now, more than ever, we know this is the most important thing that we need to make sure we nurture with our students is understanding that their view, guess what? It's not the only view. And other people have, a different view, and being able to get used to that and be aware of that. So that is probably going to be used quite a bit, the different points of view. The one with the rules icon, it has these three boxes right here. I'll show it to you rules. This one right here. The way you would use this, for example, let's talk about grammar. And let's talk about the use of dialogue. So let's say on that top box right there, you want to teach your students about dialogue. That's the number one thing that you want them to know. But then there's different components of dialogue that I don't know why I have to keep my hand up here like this, but there are different components to dialogue that you want to share with your students, and different rules for dialogue, right? When do you use dialogue? Well, and then in this this box, you'd put one rule for how they would need to use dialogue for a certain reason. And then how will the character then reply with their dialogue? And what's the rule for what does that look like? And so just different things like that. It could be capitalization on the top here. And then what's the rules for capitalization? Well, this box you can talk about, it happens in the beginning of the sentence. And this box you can talk about, well, it happens in the middle of a sentence if it's some name, proper noun, names or things like that. And so all the different rules for how to use capitalization and things to remember for capitalization. So if we're talking about healthcare here, what are the rules that are governing the treatments right now? Okay. What are some of the things that doctors have to follow in order to be able to treat a patient for certain reasons or certain things? And then the ethical icon, that's the diamond with the black and white, is that sometimes there are dilemmas that we're faced with in our life and in certain topics that we're learning about. And so what are some of those struggles and decisions that some people might have to make right now? The doctors, what are some of the ethical decisions the doctors are having to make right now between life and death, certain patients, and they have to follow the rules for the insurance companies, and then they have to follow the rules for the prescription companies, and there's a lot to think about. But then you see a patient in front of your eyes that needs your help, and so there's that tugging and that struggle, that pull. And so that's a way that you could use the ethical. And it could happen with novel studies, your units of study. There's a lot of different ethical topics that can be discussed about what you're learning. And then for master, so a master of chess would be an expert in the language of chess, the patterns, and so all these highlighted words are icons. And so if you're teaching chess, you can talk to them about the patterns and the importance of the patterns on the game board, and that the rules, there are certain rules that they need to follow when they're playing chess, and the way the game has changed over time. How did it start in the beginning? Has it changed now? Are there other games that have developed from the game of chess? Things like that. So all kinds of different, instead of just teaching status quo, just the base of the information, utilizing these icons gets deeper into the topic in all kinds of different directions. And so students who are gifted, going back to what we learned about the brain, if we just keep our conversation status quo, then we're automatically going to lose those students. They're going to be bored because they already know the basic. What they need is for them to be pushed and challenged a little bit more higher to the higher ZPD. And so these types of things would help with that. So why are these beneficial to students? Besides what I've already said, it definitely helps them be more creative in thinking. So the more they use this, the more outside the box they will be used to thinking. And so the conversations will be a little bit deeper because they're used to just not thinking in one way, but thinking it from how would this person view it and how would that person view it. So the conversation could last for a longer time. It creates problem solvers, allows the students to think for themselves, and it's definitely a workout for the mind, workout for the brain, which is exactly what our gifted students need. And not only our gifted students, but our higher achievers. And also, these have been done with students who are not high achievers and with students that are not gifted and still yield the same results that we see. So it's just a matter of setting the bar. You know, you can set the bar for an ordinary student, and if you implement these types of strategies and these icons and teach them how to use it, you scaffold it so much so that it starts to become natural and they start to use it on their own. How do you find the time to use these? So number one, I had already mentioned this, just making sure that you integrate these within all of your lessons. And it's not about doing every single one of the icons. That could be a little bit overwhelming, but you're going to find that you're going to stick with some that that just happen more often as a routine, and then you're going to find, oh, I haven't used this one, and this would be a perfect icon to use to get my students to think a little bit deeper at this on this particular topic. So you might, you know, use some sparingly, you might use some a little bit more often. You don't want to overwhelm yourself, and you also don't want to overwhelm the students. But you also want to refer to them throughout the day. So even if it's not like a separate activity where you're like, okay, so let's talk about this icon, use it more as it's a scaffold, it's a tool. So if you see it happening during the discussion that your students are having, I used to just take it off my whiteboard and hold it up and be like, this is what's happening right now. This is great, you guys. You're talking about more details about this. Or you just hit the big idea. This is what this is all about. And so the more you emphasize it when you see it happening, the more then all of a sudden it's so cool, they're going to start pointing to those magnets on the board. And they're going to start saying, oh, that's just like language of the discipline, or, ooh, that's the big idea, or, ooh, that's a detail that we can put as a pillar to our big idea. You know, and there's all kinds of different ways to use it without it being a separate time, just more of an embedded strategy. And of course, in the beginning, you are going to want to teach them how to use this. And then that would be separate time, but integrated with the topic that you're teaching them anyway. Okay, this is, we want to share this with you because this is what we, a couple of years ago, developed as scope of sequence, I guess you can call it, of what are some of, instead of every grade level covering every single thing, we kind of looked at it as growing on for each grade level. So we started with kinder, the easiest, the simplest ones to integrate and to use, that where the students would see it often anyway, would be the use of the language of the disciplines and details. And we're gonna go over about 4 or 5 of these in a little bit more detail, just so that it's something that you can use, you know, right away, or, you know, in the beginning of the year. But then after kinder, so these are the ones that they're going to focus on. That doesn't mean that if they see another icon that they feel they can use in a certain lesson, that doesn't mean, oh, I'm not allowed to use that. Not at all. It just means these are the ones we're going to really try to master with our students and really try to focus on with our students, so that when they get to first grade, we're adding the big idea. And so not only are they used to seeing the language of the discipline and details, but now first grade is going to introduce a new one, which would be the big idea. But again, it may not be introduced in first grade. They may have seen it in kinder. It's just kind of a guide to help each teacher at each grade level get an idea of what mostly was covered during the previous year. Of course, by the time we get to 5th grade, the idea would be they would have already used these and practiced these, so that you in 5th grade would be able to use any of them. Of course, always reviewing and making sure that that they remember what the icons are. But this is kind of like a grade level scope and sequence idea. And this is actually at our last collaborative meeting that we had in person, Kinder actually changed their mind on this, and I've already revised it, but they had something else, and so they wanted to stick with just these two, language of the discipline and detail. So again, constantly articulating with the team, and if at any time you like to change this or feel like you could do more or less of this, then we can always change it. Okay, so there's a ton of these, right? There's quite a bit. I think there's 11 or so. But for today, I just wanted to kind of go a little deeper with 4 of them. Okay, and actually 5, because you'll see the 5th one at the end. Super, super simple to incorporate. But we're going to talk about language of the discipline, details, big idea, and patterns. And again, I'm not going to walk you through step by step as if I had you there in person, but I'm going to give it justice. But if you'd like for me to show you what it looks like, then I can stop and definitely show you. Okay, so language of the disciplines. This is used to discuss spoken language that is specific to a certain discipline. Like earlier, we were talking about healthcare. And so there's a lot of specific words that you can think of that are not just general terms. And I want you guys to use this language of the discipline. It could be for basic terms, but we don't want it to stop at just basic terminology for a certain topic that you're teaching. We want it to be stretched to show specific things that somebody in the healthcare system would probably use more so than just the general person, okay? This is to show anytime you're teaching a novel study and you see like figurative language, that right there, you would say, okay, guys, look at this. This is something that's not ordinary, just ordinary, simple language. This right here is an extension of language, and it's just to challenge you to try to figure out what it is that they're describing here. And so you pull off that language of the discipline magnet and you show that up and you say, so, you know, in this book, you're going to see a lot of figurative language. So when you see some of this figurative language, you point this out to me, and then we're going to talk about what does it really mean. And so then again, obviously you're going deeper. So any jargon specific terminology to whatever topic that you're studying. If you're thinking about math, you know, what math tools, measurements, shapes that are more specific to when you're teaching math, then you would be describing something that you'd see anywhere else. So just to practice this real quick, and actually I should have warned you to go into this. So I'm going to go ahead and link this in case you don't already have it. I want to link this to the chat so that you can go in and do this little Answergarden just as a quick example. And on slide 83, it's this right here where it says Answergarden. It's hyperlinked to just a real quick example of something that you could have your students do when practicing language of the discipline. So the question is, and this is something that you could pose to your students, what are some words related to a nurse or a doctor? And what I want you to type in there when your responses are words that are doctor specific, healthcare specific words that you would hear them speaking in the healthcare community. not just a regular person. I don't want you like words like kind and nurture and things like that, that we know that doctors and nurses are. But what are some of the terminology? What are some of the tools that you might hear them use or see them use, or terminology? Go ahead and type it in the Answergarden link. You can, and then I will refresh. Okay, good. I see scale. You can type in as many. I think I gave you unlimited, so we can get a stethoscope. Very good. Scale. You go to the doctor. What are some of the things that you hear? What's it called when they tell you what's wrong with you? Starts with a D. Or what's it called when they tell you what they think your outcome is going to be? It starts with a P. Let me refresh. Empty the bladder. Bladder, that's a good one. Bladder. Diagnosis, very good. And antihistamine.
I have to tell you guys my story with the empty the bladder. I had just had at my adulthood, but I am a true English learner, ladies and gents. I had just had my son. No, I was in labor with my son, TMI here, but I seriously was like just ready to have this kiddo. And the nurse comes and she says, honey, do you need to empty your bladder? And I was like, can I do that? Like, can I do it by myself? Is that like a special procedure? So it was just the way she asked. And I literally was like, I can do that? And then she goes, do you need to go to the restroom? I was like, oh, yes, I'm sure I can do that by myself. But it was just that way that they talked. For them, is normal language. But for me, it was like, that sounds like a very fancy way.
That's so important. I'm glad you mentioned that, Adriana, because, you know, as much as we're talking about this is specific to gifted, it's not specific to gifted students. This is a beautiful strategy to use and incorporate with any language learner, whether it be Spanish or English. And think about, okay, you have all of these here. I see the word antihistamine. You can break that up, right? You can teach about the different parts of that word, what the different parts of that word mean. And there's all kinds of other words that you can use to break up, to show like the origin of the word, to show the prefixes, the suffixes, the affixes, and how it changes the language when you use certain parts within a word. But the idea behind this, you guys, is like, as you see here, we have diagnosis, antihistamine, patient, stethoscope, scale. These are all words that are normal words that the people in the healthcare profession would talk about. And I'm just using healthcare profession to make it easy. But it could be on any topic that you have. So there's a lot of words the kids could have used here related to a nurse or doctor. Like I mentioned, they're caring, they're nurturing, they help you, you know, they save lives. But trying to think of the words that they don't usually use, okay? What is it? The discipline specific words. That's where you're trying to get them to go when you're using the language of the discipline. All right, moving on to asking, you can see my screen again? Okay, moving on to details. You would use this to be able to show the students that, the reason why it's a flower, first of all, is you would share that every part of there are different parts to a flower. And so there are different details that you can incorporate when describing a flower. So there's the stem, the petals, the roots, etc. Okay, so the idea behind using the flower is we want them to think about those details about whatever it is that they're learning, whatever topic they're learning. So the main thing, the main topic would go in the middle, and they could literally, you can literally have this on a piece of paper, you know, or butcher paper, or digitally with a big flower, and then in the center they would type in the topic, and then all along the petals they can type in specific details that they are jotting along the way of whatever topic it is that they're learning about. And so you can incorporate this when you're teaching the main idea and the details of the story. The petals could be certain clues for the story. It could even be, let's say you just want to dissect a character, and the character's name could go in the very middle, in the center, and then all of the flower petals could be them analyzing how the character is, what type of character they are, and so they're describing characters. It could be describing anything in more detail. So normally I would say, let's practice with the DLI program. So why don't we just do this? So in the center, we would have DLI program. Now, my task to you would be, go ahead and type in the chat some words or phrases that have something to do, some important detail to do about the DLI program. Definitely. Bilingualism could be a petal. Thank you, Bertha. Spanish immersion could be a petal. Idel could be a petal. Very good. Culture. Thank you, Sochi. So you get the idea. So these are things here that all have something to do with the topic, and we can go deeper. We can go deeper, but these are different components of it, okay? And it's just a quick little thing that they can draw. So let's say they're doing a novel study, or you're teaching them a specific time in history, and you want, let's American Revolution, and then you want them to start reading for a specific reason. Now let's read for the different events that occurred because during the Revolution. And so they, when you get to the time of the Boston Tea Party or the Boston Massacre, that would be a place that in their notes they can notate the little flower, and that flower means that that's an important detail about this topic of the American Revolution. Any questions on the language of the discipline or the details icon before I move on to the big idea? Okay. All right, so now the big idea. Now, this is very similar to details, but also very different at the same time. This is where you would work from, you have all of this information. Okay, so now that you have all of this information and you have all of these details, what is that overarching big idea or theme of what it is that you're learning, or what it is that they just learned? So thinking about the, let's use the Constitution of the United States just as an example. So we know, I'm sure that you know what the Constitution of the United States, what the purpose is of the Constitution of the United States. So what would you say? You can put yourself off of mute. What would you say is the big idea of the Constitution of the United States?
Give people rights.
Very good. So let's say on the triangle on the top, and this is set to be like a house with 4 pillars, because the icon has these 4 pillars to show that there are 4, not just 4 important parts to make the big idea, but that the details are very important in order for that structure, for that roof to stay standing, right? So if we, in the little triangle on the top, on the roof, we put the purpose of the United States Constitution is to protect our rights, or to explain our rights, then that would be a good statement to put up there, with knowing that there's those pillars right there. Those could be details that are going to help lift and support that main idea. Okay, so you can think about these pillars as a written place for them to type in a detail, like the flower petals, for example. These would be where the flower petals are. But then the main idea, when you're using this, is because you've come to what that big idea is, that overarching theme or that big idea. Does that make sense? Okay. So there are some Blackline masters and some resources that I'm going to share with you that are in our DLI team drive that have these things like in printable copies for you to actually use paper pencil, or if you want to just like turn them into your background of your slide, if we need to do this virtually and you turn them into the slide background where you can have them insert text, you can do that as well. So this one right here is the patterns icon, and you want to use this when whatever you're teaching is showing recurring elements or recurring factors that are happening in your discussion or the topic. So this, you'll see a lot of this happening, or easy to use this icon when you're reading a novel, because every story has a pattern, right? It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. But even deeper than that, stories have characters. And with characters, there are certain patterns that happen throughout a novel, you know, with the same character. So you may get a sense of how the character is because they have a pattern of doing something similar over and over and over, right? Like I just was reading, I did a demo lesson on this story called Rosie Revere Engineer. And it was about this little girl who wanted to become an engineer, and she kept on building these little gadgets. And she would throughout the story, she's describing all of these really weird gadgets that she would be creating. And so, of course, like if I'm predicting, I can predict, okay, this girl's gonna make another gadget. And so you can kind of just think along that way when you're using the patterns icon. But there's definitely a lot of, you know, when you're teaching math, we know that there's a lot of patterns that happen with math. So you would be able to, you know, bring this icon to their attention and then go a little bit deeper in the discussion, like the metric system, right? It's a pattern. You're adding tens to it, or you're adding hundreds or whatever, right? You're adding a certain amount of zeros so that it makes sense for them. So explain to them why. Well, it's a pattern, easy to remember. So ordinarily, just to show an example of this being in use, I would have you guys listen to this little read aloud of There Was an Old Lady Who Swallowed a Fly, but I think you're probably already familiar with it. And so the pattern behind this is that it's always working its way from what just recently happened to what happened at first. So an old lady who swallowed a fly to catch this, to do this, and to do this, right? And so there's a pattern in the story as well. And so just as an example there. Do you guys have any questions on the big idea or patterns? You know, I've talked about these four, the language of the discipline with the lips, the details with the flower, the patterns, and which one? And then this one, the big ideas. So those four are probably the easiest ones to incorporate, in addition to, I mean, multiple perspectives and rules. I mean, a lot of these you'll find, oh my gosh, this is perfect for me to use this particular thing, because I'm talking about the rules for the steps for multiplying long or doing long division. Okay, and so there's rules and there's steps, right? And so you can do it for that, but there's a lot that you can incorporate easily. But I just chose four of the main ones. And so just to give you an idea of how you could use the others, I clipped this out here to show some questions that you could ask when utilizing some of these other icons. And I think that's also linked where I'm about to show you in just a minute as well. This is the fifth icon that I said kind of sneaks up at you, but it's so easy to incorporate, and it's this. Do you have any questions? Are you curious about something? Do you wonder about how this would look? Or do you wonder about how you could roll this out? And so right now, utilizing this icon, I'm going to ask you, are there any unanswered questions or things that you're curious about?
I am.
Go
I
for
was
it.
wondering, so a lot of this, and I'm loving all of this. You know, you were saying like the kids need it. I'm thinking I need it too, because it really just takes it to another level of intellectualism that I enjoy and am passionate about.
Yes.
What I am wondering though is it seems very abstract, and I love taking kids to that abstract thinking. But is there like a resource, an author of how I can scaffold this for maybe kids who are not really used to that abstract thinking? Some way to take it like from the concrete visual to the abstract?
Yes. And I'm glad you asked that, because I probably would have forgotten to take you back here. I mentioned a resource. Let me go back. Resource, and it's linked here. Right here. This guy. His name is Ian Bird. I'm going to take you to his website. Oh my gosh, the way this man describes the simplicity of all of these, but then also sharing ways to be able to incorporate it into deeper thinking. There's tons of little blogs, articles, samples, ideas for how to use these. And I mean, you can spend hours with this man's website here, but everything you need to know about depth and complexity, when too much depth leads to simplicity. I mean, he's got so many fantastic articles. My big mistake with frames. So every icon has like a black line master I mentioned, like a specific frame. And so he'll talk about things that don't think that you're using it right if you do this, and it will walk you through examples of how it has been used and how to avoid certain mistakes that you may get caught up in. And not only that, but he does it for every, so across the disciplines icon, for changing over time, for unanswered questions, for the language of the discipline. And you click here and he just takes you to things that I know will help you in like what you're talking about. And again, remembering these are for taking them to the next level, but he does talk about how to explain it to begin with, so that they know that the purpose is that we're trying to get to that deeper level. And so he uses like simple examples and topics so that they understand it before moving into the deeper, more complex topics. So I don't know if that answered your question, but definitely this is a great resource for that, as well as I wanted to share with you some things that we have in, I just always go to the DLI dashboard because I know it's always linked there. The DLI team drive, which I also have linked on the DLI dashboard. But just to remind you and let you know that we have some things and some resources and Black Line Masters in here under Gate Resources. Oh my gosh, it was there a second ago. Here it is. Gate Resources in the DLI team drive. And so there are some thinking maps and some graphic organizers there. And these are some of the things that I mentioned are printables or PDFs that you can turn into your background slides. But we have some of these resources both in English and in Spanish. And I'm not going to waste your time. I think my computer is going cuckoo and taking too long to load, but here we go. So here's an example of one of the graphic organizers. And so let's say you're teaching about a topic that is explaining either ethics, like a dilemma, like this person's side and this person's side, then you would be able to have them kind of jot down their notes or annotations on this type of graphic organizer here. And then also it's showing multiple perspectives. So there's different ways that you can use this. And let's say you were using this ladies, and you also wanted them to incorporate some of that academic or content specific language, you can also even have them, you know what, on top of that, I want you to draw the language of the discipline icon on here, because I want you to remember that I want you to incorporate some of that academic language or that discipline specific language. And you can have them add anything. You know, there's different ways that you can use this. I want you to think about this, this, and this. You can do like a little different type of frame. That's just one example. And then we have connecting across disciplines. And so they, given whatever topic, what are some things to consider when we're looking at it from the science, from science, like how would this topic have affected the sciences during this time? Or how would this topic, or where have you seen examples of this topic in a story? And so then they can jot certain things there. With math, what are some of the things that they had to consider with math going back to the American Revolution? Well, taxes, right? So then, okay, so taxes were important. What's important to consider when thinking about taxes and math? And what does that look like? Is it like fractions, percentages? Like, what does that look like? And so this is just another place for them to annotate their deep thinking, complex thinking thoughts as you're teaching them certain things. So this could be in an interactive notebook. This could be in, you know, like a slide deck, as I mentioned before. It could be printed for them separately, so they're just jotting as they're going through the unit. But there's others. There's other examples here that of the icons and graphic organizers for you to use with them that are in English and in Spanish. And so I wanted you guys to be aware that you would go into the DLI team drive, you would click on Gate Resources, and then there's Thinking Maps and Graphic Organizers. And then another thing that's in the Gate Resources are the icons. And in case you just wanted to copy and paste like the clip, the images, there are the icons here. And so, you know, if you want to just do like snip and use, they're there. And then there's all kinds of icon, different ways, things that you can clip, some bigger, some smaller, however you guys want to use them. But as you can see, there are several. Okay. And let me just go back and make sure I didn't. Oh, there's one more thing. I'd like to close off this final module, and that is to do a little quiz on how and on what you've learned about the usage of Gate, the Gate icon. So, but before we get into this, do you guys have any other questions? Okay. All right, so let's play. Take out your cell phone so it's easier for you not to toggle between screens, and go ahead and go to Kahoot. I will put up the code. Classic mode. All right. So it's going to be kahoot.it 363-840. Okay, ready? Here we go. If you use this icon in your annotations, you all right, yep, if you use that icon or your students use that icon in their annotations, that means that they have found an important word or a word specific to the discipline or academic content word. All right, Mr. Daniel. If you use this icon in your annotations, you All right. Okay. That one is a little bit tricky, but no, I'm glad this came up. So when you're using the flower, that is mainly concentrating on the petals. If you use this icon in your reading, you, very good. And I think I forgot to mention, I actually used this with my students. Just so you know, this is one way, like when you're teaching the icons, just to kind of check in on if they understand when they could use this. And that's why it says when you are reading it, or when you're doing your annotation. So I actually use this for the students. But yep, the main idea, and or also like the theme. Okay, the main idea or theme of whatever topic you're learning. And the last question, where would you see patterns? Very good. All of these were actually correct. All of the above. So patterns, you can see patterns in math, in stories, in routines, and several other places, but just to kind of give them an idea when they would actually use it. So who do we have? In third place, we have Maestra Velasco. In second place, we have Daniel. And in first place, ooh, Bertha.
I'm glad because my phone is dying. I'm like, oh
no. I know, the suspense. The suspense was killing me. They always leave that last, the number one, forever. But anyway, it looks like either I'm a good teacher or you guys are just great learners, and you all have gotten 100% on this, to be honest with you. All of your answers were correct, and so hopefully this was a brief overview, but hopefully it was enough to where you could start feeling comfortable using these in your classroom with your kids, just to kind of deepen that discussion a little bit more. And if you have any questions, if you would like to share out or any comments, feel free to do so.
I did put another link in the chat because I recently found out this website. It's called SaltMe. I don't know if any of you guys have used it already, but I would recommend clicking on it before the Zoom ends so you guys can have some time to explore it. But I use it whole class with my students, and they just love playing this and just giving them that time to think about and just kind of analyze the problems.
And is it specific to a certain topic?
I don't think so. It's like patterns. So yeah, it's super cool. So starting off with the first one, you have the circle and the triangle, but then it's also a balance, and it's telling you at the top that the total is 10. So then what two numbers could equal 10, but they're not the same number because they're not the same shape. So there's so much to talk about. I absolutely love it. And then as you can tell, it gets more and more intense as you go on. So, with younger levels, you can still start this off, and then kind of see where it takes you, see where the students go. So I absolutely love it. I just wanted to share that out.
Oh, I'm so glad you did. This thing is absolutely amazing. Oh my goodness.
And it looks like students might be able to sign in. I've never tried it that way, but that could be something as well.
Oh yeah, log in to save progress. Okay.
So I just made my teacher account, and then we save it as we go together.
That is so cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. I wouldn't say that's a brain break. It's actually a brain exerciser, a brain workout, but definitely a great way to show patterns. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Of course.
Anyone else want to share out?
I did want to say that we were going to get the gate training right before we left in March, so we missed it. I was really looking forward to it. I got a little taste of it at that DLI consortium that I went to, and I loved it. Oh my goodness, it was so, so good talking about gate and DLI together. So what I'm trying to say is if they have any kind of virtual training over the summer, please let me know. I know, like I said, Denny had already gotten the training for Gisela and I, and then we missed it when we left March 13th.
Yeah, I remember that.
Mhm.
Okay. Do you have any resources that you guys got from the consortium that we can add to the DLI team drive?
Yes, I'm going to be going through them because Giselle and I, we already have a project for fall up our sleeve. It's called the Injustice Project, and it gives you just everything you need all in one. And so I was going to put that in a folder anyway. So I'll put it in our DLI folder as well.
Okay, that would be great. All right, so I definitely notated that if I see anything DLI/GATE specific in regards to professional development or webinars, I will definitely share that out. And other than that, I just want to thank you guys so much for spending so much time and really having the passion to even listen to all of this in regards to DLI and just different strategies of helping our students. And hopefully these helped you. And if there's anything in the future that that you see or hear that you think would benefit the good of the team, please share that with DLI support. Hey, guess what? I saw this, and we could research it and see what the possibilities are. But I just, more than anything, want to thank you guys for your time, your energy, and the passion that you have for doing this amazing work for our kids. I can't thank you enough for sticking with us. Is there anything?
Thank you, ladies.
Anything you'd like to share to close off our DLI modules, Adriana, or?
No, just thank you. Ditto, ditto, ditto. Thank you. This is definitely time spent outside of your regular duties as everything, just personal and professional. So we thank you very much, and we hope to continue the good work. If you guys need anything during the summer, we're at your service 100%. Any ideas, any thoughts, any dreams, talk to us, and we'll continue to work throughout the summer. But I know that all of us need a nice break.
All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. Have a wonderful summer. Take care.